both sides avoiding some very important issues here. First, our massive immigration, which the government pushes on us to get more growth. Well, it doesn't seem to be really working, does it? And second, our lazy luck that we've been riding on for so long may be running out. I talked a short while ago to Leith van Onselen, an economist who has worked for the Australian Victorian Treasury and is now co-founder of macrobusiness.com.au. macrobusiness.com.au. He's done a lot of research on immigration. Leith van Onselen, thank you so much indeed for your time. Hey, listen, last year we imported, just through immigration alone, not even natural births, 240,000 people, right? And yet, in the last 6 months of the year, we got a negative growth rate per person. Per person. We actually got poorer. Is there some sort of connection here?
Yeah, certainly the Australian economy has been running on people. So other economies around the world have used quantitative easing. They've basically printed money to boost aggregate growth. Australia's effectively done quantitative peopling. So we've been importing, a very large immigration program. We've been running population growth at about 2.5 times the OECD average. And what this has done is it's created an accounting trick whereby the overall economy has grown at a fairly strong rate, but per person, we've actually been going, the growth rate's been falling for well over a decade. And in fact, over the last 6 months, the per capita economy has been falling. So we're actually in a per capita recession at the moment.
So it seems to me that we have increasingly got to conceptually divide, when we talk about something being good for the economy, we should actually be asking what's good for Australians, because they seem to be two different things now. Can I start now? Immigration, right? What was the purpose, what has been the purpose of giving us such an incredible immigration rate, like the population of Hobart every year?
Well, I think the government is fixated on this notion of growth. So the more people you bring in, the better the overall economy looks. And this is the primary reason why Australia hasn't had a recession for nearly 30 years, when in fact we've had 3 recessions when you measure it on a per capita basis. And it's not hard to see why this happens, because the big business lobby groups, who basically pull the strings of the federal government, love big migration. Big migration helps to lower wages. Big migration means that you don't have to train your employees because you can just pull someone from overseas, and also means much bigger markets to sell to. So it's a win-win for them. But obviously, in a large resource-rich country like Australia, the last thing you want to be doing is running a big migration program, because effectively your national wealth, which comes from resources, gets diluted among more people. So it's actually a race to the bottom.
So we've seen the headlines, the economy's doing well, people feeling poorer and wondering what the heck's going on. Now we're seeing a lot of people upset about falling wages, or no wage growth rather. We also then had the mining boom propping us up. You talked about the immigration boom propping us up. We had a mining boom propping us up. That's gone. Then we had a housing boom that propped us up. That is now going too. What is the future looking for us?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right. We've had basically 3 booms for the economy. The immigration boom, as you mentioned. We then had the mining boom. Really more the construction boom that came with that. We built all these extra mines that create a lot of employment. That's now gone, although commodity prices have rebounded a bit. And then on top of that, we've had this massive housing bubble, price bubble, as well as construction bubble. And both of those are now unwinding. So really Australia's growth drivers are going. And there are effectively 4 growth drivers for the economy. You've got household consumption, which is now falling because of falling house prices. And that's been artificially held up for the last few years because the household savings rate, so how much households actually save, fell to the lowest level in the post-GFC's, post-global financial crisis period. And what that's meant is that households have basically been borrowing because their wages have been flat to pay for consumption. Well, that's unsustainable. Now we've got house prices falling and we've got housing construction falling. The other 2 growth drivers are infrastructure investment or public investment. Now, infrastructure investments expected to peak this year and then start falling, and business investment's going okay. But basically 3 of the economy's 4 growth drivers towards the end or have already peaked. So there isn't particularly good future for for Australian economy, at least in the medium term.
Now, you mentioned infrastructure investment. That's sort of subsumed in the next question. There's been one other driver we haven't talked about specifically, and that is government spending, big government spending, trying to keep this whole joint afloat, this massive spending on the National Insurance Disability Scheme. How long can this go on? Because we're actually running a massive deficit, massive federal debt. How long can that particular boom continue?
Well, it obviously can't continue indefinitely, but the government has had some luck in that the commodity prices have rebounded quite strongly in the last year. Part of that's because there was a flood in Brazil, which propped up iron ore prices. And what that's meant is that the government is picking up more company tax revenue, which is allowing them to then rehypothecate it through to these schemes. But ultimately, it is unsustainable, and unless you're going to forever increase taxes, you can't have the economy running on government spending.
Leith, this is the picture then. So the government's been propping up the economy, or the base figures, the headline figures, with a massive immigration level, which for many people is unsustainable when in their own lives, crowded streets and all that. We've had it propped up by a housing bubble, which is gone, a mining construction bubble, which is gone, and a government spending bubble, which can't keep going. Our future does not look bright.
Yeah, well, Paul Keating termed the phrase the recession we had to have in the early 90s. Well, I think this is the housing bust we've got to have. You just have to look at places like Sydney and Melbourne where prices just went to unbelievably ridiculous levels. And it was always going to burst. And Australia's household debt is the second highest in the world. And that was obviously unsustainable. So I think Australia's facing some pretty tough times. And this comes at a time when real household disposable income per capita, according to the national accounts that was released yesterday, is lower today than it was in December 2011. So households have effectively been going backwards.
Leith van Onselen, you do not paint a pretty picture, but I think this is a grim reality that our politicians need to confront, and which so far, from the political discourse I've seen, they are not. They are not talking about these things at all. It's like we're living in an alternative reality. Leith van Onselen, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.